Good afternoon. My name is Steven Zamnick, and I'm here to talk a little bit about hollow turning and captive tool rests. Over the years, I had my opinions about captive tool rests, and pretty much I was anti-assistance. I had this feeling that it took the skill out of hollow turning. Well, as I've gotten a little bit older and I've hollowed more and more vessels, and it's done a number on my body, I've slowly but surely grown an appreciation for the captive tool rest. Now, I have over the years planned on purchasing one of the many on the market, and like most of you, I'm a wood turner on a budget. And you're looking at spending in the upwards of $300 to $600 for a complete system. So last week, this is my second run with it. Last week I dug through my pile of scrap steel out in the yard, and within an evening put together my own captive tool rest, and I'm here to talk about that a little bit today and kind of walk you through it. I did a little bit of research on the internet like most of you do, and came across quite a few threads about building your own captive tool rest. So, really simple design, very user friendly, very adjustable. I've got it set up to work with my large Vega lathe, which has a short bed on it, which was one of the biggest problems I had when looking at the other brands of captive tool rests that were on the market. Compatibility and like I said, I've got a short bed, so it would have been difficult to use. So I created a completely mobile unit that works great, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. Okay, so this might be a little shaky. I am holding my camera in my hand. But, like I said, pretty basic design. I had two pieces of steel pipe that sleeved together. Once again, this is something you could pick up at a local hardware store relatively cheap. The whole thing would be extremely cost effective if you were to go out and purchase the steel. So I took a larger diameter pipe, sank it in a 5-gallon bucket of concrete, which was basically an 80-pound bag, and so far it seems to do the job. I've managed to reach over the tool rest close to 12 inches with little to no vibration. It's worked great, and it's not too heavy, so it is relatively easy to drag around the shop and get out of my way when the time comes. So once again, pipe, sleeve, this drops right down inside of here. It's relatively long in case I need to adjust it, so I could turn it around and use it over here on the mini lathe if I ever needed to, which probably won't happen. Drilled some large diameter holes through the outer sleeve and welded a couple 1/2-inch nuts onto it. And as you can see, which this is still pretty raw and in its experimental phase, but so far is working very well. Took some 1/2-inch machine bolts and run them in to cinch that pipe up and create a nice sturdy joint. Let's see, so the main gist of this, cut a little, essentially a dado in here. I am a woodworker, so I notched my steel sleeve, dropped that piece of 1-inch square steel tubing into the round pipe. Once again, welded that, which if you don't have accessibility to a welder, I'm sure you could figure out a way to bolt this together with a little bit of ingenuity, or everybody's got a friend who does some welding. So then I went ahead and welded together a nut and a washer on the bottom side of the actual tool rest. That bolt is just loose with another piece of 1-inch steel tubing, and that is the captive portion. Pretty self-explanatory, and like I said, it took me an evening to put together. The longest part was waiting for the concrete to dry, and you know, I actually used it before it fully cured, and no cracking, surprisingly. So basically, like I said, you know, relatively cost-effective. Sure beats spending $600 on a tool rest to bolt onto your lathe. That may or may not work. You know, everything has a lot of adjustment in it. Completely movable, like I said, 5-gallon bucket. You know, if you needed to, you could put it on some casters, I'm sure, and roll it around and lock them down. So onto the gouge. This is 1/2-inch gas line. I have always used, for the most part, Robert Sorby gouges. So right here, if you're familiar with the Sovereign system, this is the adapter that goes into the Sovereign system handles. So I've got several of these, and I just had to ream the inside of this gas pipe out a little bit because gas pipe is welded. So I had to ream that weld out of there. Let me try to focus a little bit. Ream that weld out of there, and I can slip all of my hollowing tools into there depending on whether they fit straight into the pipe or into one of the numerous adapters for different size shanks. On the side of this, I just drilled a few holes clear through, tapped it with 1/4-20s. Those still need to be cut off and made shorter. As of right now, I've kind of liked them because when I'm hollowing, I can get my hand in there and, you know, kind of have a nice little leverage point, almost like a handle. I might eventually weld a handle onto this or make something that threads on. So down to the body of this, as you've seen, I'm sure, in other captive systems, it doesn't have the cage, whereas I believe it's the Jameson, Lyle Jamieson's, does have this. And what this is doing is it's preventing the tool from rolling, which, you know, basically takes you to a point where all you have to do is control the pressure applied, you know, moving in and out of the vessel. You don't have to worry about the tool rolling on you. It takes all the torque off of your shoulder and hips and legs, and it sure makes hollow turning really nice. One thing I did find, that with this 1/2-inch gas pipe, if I were to build another one of these, I'd go a little bit larger. I had a little bit of flex in here, and you know, when you should drop your elbow on it, it's pretty good. But what I decided to do was take a piece of 3/8 rebar, drop it inside of this sleeve here, and I filled it with hot lead, which actually added a nice amount of weight to the handle and a little bit of rigidity to it as well. Whoa, I'm tripping. So you can see there's some lead in there. Oops, sorry. And there's actually a piece of rebar right there and some lead encasing it. So all in all, the system is extremely cheap, extremely easy to build, and works absolutely excellent. Now, I did put a very long bar on this, and you could customize this however you wanted to. You could make this shorter or long, but I do like, you know, turning deep vessels, and like I said, I've always done it by hand, and it's pretty brutal on the body. So this is a piece of spalted maple that I dug up out of the yard, and it's a pretty decent sized depth. And like I said, this is only the second time I've used it, and I'll show you a piece of walnut I turned the other day, and I was very, very happy with the results. And like I said, anybody with a little bit of ingenuity could throw this together. Plus, you get good satisfaction out of, you know, building your own tools. You know, it's one of those things. So, like I said, here is the first piece of wood that I turned with this tool rest, and this was over the course of last week. Really made hollowing very easy. Now I was just experimenting, so I didn't go with as small of a hole as I normally would have. It's relatively large because I was just, wanted to keep an eye on the cutter and all that kind of good stuff to see what kind of flex I was getting, and it will progress with time. But you can see, relatively uniform. Now I don't use a laser guide, and that is something I might add over time, but I do have a pair of shop-made calipers that I measure with, and this is about 11 inches deep, and hollowing it was a blast. Made it really easy. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I wasn't worried about, or not worried, but complaining about my elbow and arm hurting or my hip or anything like that. It really aided. So now that I've briefly described my homemade captive hollowing tool rest, I'm going to fire the lathe up and give you a brief demonstration. Oh, and by the way, with that steel on steel, you will get a little bit of friction. I keep a block of wax handy, and I've just been waxing the rail and the gouge, and it keeps friction low and keeps the tool rest sliding with ease. And yeah, let's fire it up and show you how it goes. So now another thing before I get started here, I do have a standard 3/16 swivel tip cutter mounted in the end of my boring bar. And I'm sure you've noticed I've got the big steady rest I built, supporting the work. I do like that added security in the event that you do have some sort of catch or anything like that the piece of wood is locked in there and supported really well out at the end, where you get a lot of vibration. So between the captive tool rest and the work support rest, you do have a great deal of vibration dampening. And vibration is the number one destroyer of things. It's your worst enemy. So let's get started here. So one of the beauties about this as well is before we get the lathe turned on, I can actually insert the tool inside of the vessel. Oh, my tool rest isn't locked down. And it makes life a lot easier turning the lathe on and off. It's a lot safer than having to snake the tool in and out of a small opening, especially when you're working with a hook tool, a swan neck, or whatever you want to call it. That's always been mainly where all my accidents have occurred, is fishing that gouge inside of a tight opening and having to pull it all the way back out so I can turn the lathe on and off. And this kind of solves that problem as well. So you can see the tool is in the opening of the vessel, and lathe is spinning. Let's give it a whirl. Looks like I actually need to adjust my cutter tip. So if you give me 1 second here, I'll get going in just a second. Alright, so we're back in business here. I changed the angle on my cutter tip. I was maxed out from the previous cuts I had already made and didn't bother checking before I press record. So here we go, cutter tip adjusted, and we're ready to rock and roll. Now you can hear that cut. Nice and smooth. We're going slow with easy pressure. And we're removing a lot of material here with little to no vibration. Just take your time and slowly work it. can pretty much just very, very lightly touch the tool and guide the tool around inside of there. You know, changing the angle of the tool rest here. Let's just work the bottom of it. Trying not to bump the camera, it's kind of hanging over my head here. Oh, I'm bumping it. So like I said, lathe still running. I can take my hands off the tool, turn it off, and see what kind of shavings we got. Let me swing this around. I can yank this guy out. The air hose nozzle here. Okay. You see that's quite a bit of dust, little to no vibration, removed quite a bit of wood. And like I said, so far pretty satisfied with the whole system, and I think it's gonna work great for years to come. Yeah, so like I said, I mean, with a little bit of ingenuity, you know, mine's not necessarily right, but it's also not wrong. It gets the job done. If you come up with a better design, I'd love to hear about it. But so far, pretty satisfied, and I think you could build one easily yourself. And if you have any questions, feel free to comment. So after reviewing my footage, I felt the need to show you a clip or two of the business end of the rest in action. You know, you saw a moment of my hands guiding the rest, but you never actually got to see the captive tool rest in the frame. It's just really large, which suits my needs and may not suit yours. But it's a good starting point, and here we go. I'll get the lathe fired up again, and you'll be able to see this end working, doing its magic. Alright, here we go. Yeah. Tighten that just a little bit. I hear those nice smooth cuts. You hear steel rattling a little bit, but you know, what are you gonna do? So that should give you a pretty good idea. And like I said, for the wood turner on a budget who loves turning hollow vessels and wants to save some of the hurt on their body, it's a real cheap make. And I mean, for me it was virtually free. It was a bag of concrete because it was all scrap steel from other projects and whatnot. But like I said, very cost effective, especially when you start looking at some of the other hollowing systems out there that can cost you a fortune. So tell me what you think. I'd love to hear back from you. You know, critique me, and I hope some of you really like the concept and put your own together and tell me how you think it works.